Welcome everybody to this business recovery planning webinar. This is the second part of a webinar that we ran 3 weeks ago, which was really focused on business continuity planning, which was looking at the key elements of what to do with your business to make sure that you were protected as we went into lockdown. And now as we're starting to look towards hopefully restricting some of those or removing some of those lockdown restrictions, this particular webinar is now going to look at what are the key things as business owners we ought to be looking at in terms of planning for coming out of lockdown and planning for a very different future to the one that we probably originally had in mind at the start of this year. So for those of you who don't know me, this is me, Phil Sayers. I have to say that the photo on the screen probably isn't a fair representation of what I look like right now, and I haven't yet gone for the hair clippers, but probably need to very soon. For those of you who don't know me, my background is I'm a career salesman, sales director, CEO. I've worked with and run small businesses throughout my career. And nowadays I work with small businesses to help them improve the way they sell their products and services, to improve the way they run their businesses. And this is done through sort of sales training, but also through business coaching in a number of different ways, whether that's individually or within groups. I'm also a published author, so my book, It's All About the Value, gives a very simple approach to improving the way that businesses sell their products and services, and it's particularly designed for business owners who perhaps don't have a formal background in selling. For those of you who've not used Zoom, I suspect that's probably very few at the moment, you can use the audio settings to select and test your speakers. You can also use it to mute yourself. I apologize for that. We will have a question and answer session at the end, but I would ask that everybody leaves themselves on mute for now. So if you do have any questions, if you can submit them via the chat facility, and we'll pick those up at the end. I've also had a couple of questions that have been submitted by people who wanted to attend this morning but can't make it. So we'll also have a look at those as well. Okay, so I wanted to start with a thought for the day, really, which is quite apt given the situation we're in at the moment and what we're probably all seeing within our own businesses. And this idea that smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. And I'm very much a believer in looking at the current situation and accepting that, yes, it's incredibly challenging, massively challenging for some people. But if we can work our way through this, then our businesses and we as individuals are going to be far, far stronger as we come out the other side. So our agenda for today, I've got 10 items. We will cover this, my guess is in around about sort of 40 minutes. We'll look at closing the disconnect between us and our sort of support network. We'll look at the need to reinvent ourselves and our businesses. We'll touch on our personal budgets and our business budgets, what opportunities we can see, what vulnerabilities we perhaps need to manage, looking at identifying and then managing the risks that our businesses are facing. We'll look at setting goals and actions and then pulling everything together as a complete package. We'll look at what your next steps really ought to be after this session, and then I'll give you a quick overview of some of the support that perhaps we can help you with. I do have to, though, throw in a quick disclaimer. Proton Sales Development is not an insolvency specialist. So if any of you are really in that really tricky position of thinking whether or not you need to look at perhaps winding up the business, and sadly there will be some who will have to do that, I'm not in a position to give you professional advice on that score, but certainly if any of you do need introductions, I do know suitably qualified specialists I can introduce you to. Okay, so I wanted to share some thoughts about how we can stay better connected at this time. So I'm not talking about how we can be better connected with technology, with things like these webinars or online meetings, although these are hugely important. I'm really coming from the perspective of how we can work together more effectively now and in the future, where your expertise can be combined with ours to create outcomes that wouldn't be possible working alone. Now, in our view, or in my view, it's never been more important to create and connect with a team of people who can help you at this point in time. So people like perhaps your banker, your legal and HR advisors, your accountants, your bookkeepers, so that together you can come up with a far better plan. At Pro10 Sales Development, our core purpose is helping our clients build a better business. And that's why we're running this webinar. This should be just the beginning of how we can work in better together. So please, please take lots of notes. Don't be shy about asking questions, and we'll get into it. And if any, I am recording this session, so if any of you do want a copy of the recording afterwards, please get in touch and we'll send that over to you. So during times of adversity like these, we're often forced to think outside the box, to reinvent the way we work or behave. And I really believe that there are four main opportunities that we can use to reinvent our businesses. And the first of these is to innovate. And the Oxford Dictionary definition of innovation is the introduction of new things, ideas, or ways of doing something. Now, one example of what that I've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic is a company who, quite bizarrely in many ways, they changed from selling travel pillows, and clearly their market just evaporated overnight, and they've switched to selling hair clippers, which given my comments earlier on, seemed quite apt. So a real switch in focus, but yet incredibly successful for them. So in this sense, innovation is doing something completely and radically different to what you were doing before. So an example for you might be just introducing a completely new product line or service. The second way to reinvent is to re-engineer. And again, the dictionary definition of re-engineering is to change and improve the design of a product or system. So in other words, use what you've already got to produce something completely different. So a really good example of this we've seen in the UK is gin companies looking at what their plant can make and then moving from producing gin to creating their own hand sanitizer. Another example is the 7 Formula One teams who took up the NHS challenge in the UK to make ventilators. So certainly consider about, are there other things that you can do with your existing systems, with your existing products, but re-engineering them in a way that will still be appealing to perhaps new customers for you. The third way to reinvent your business is to adapt or change the way you deliver your products or services. So remember the definition of adaptation, which is the process by which a species becomes fitted to its environment. In other words, if we take the new normal or the new environment that we find ourselves in, how can we change to suit that environment better? Good examples of this would be, I know that locally there's a beauty therapy business that they emailed their client base and they offered a free online skin consultation if they bought a product, as well as new bundles of product, including things like full-size products and multiple samples. And they marketed this as the home facial. And that business was unable to offer beauty therapy in the traditional way during lockdown, so they needed to adapt to, in their case, an online solution. So we know we can reinvent in three ways. There's innovation, re-engineering, adaptation, and now number 4 is widening your lane. And what we mean by widening your lane is to broaden your product or service offering. So for example, the cafe who broadens their offering from purely sort of cabinet food and coffee to include new ready-made meals, boxed sweet treats to selling wholesale ingredients, and even ingredient bundles with recipes for making their signature treats. So with these 4 ideas in mind, innovation, re-engineering, adaptation, or broadening your offering, think very seriously about what can you do in your business. And this is what business recovery planning is all about. Now, there's a natural order in which to reinvent your business. With business continuity planning, for those of you who attended the last webinar, we asked you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Business recovery planning is no different in that respect. And remember that the business that you have is there to serve you, not the other way around. You shouldn't be a slave to your business. So step 1 in business recovery planning is to put your shareholder or owner hat on and define what you need to get from your business. So think about, can you make savings in your personal spending to reduce cash flow strain on the business? No doubt you've already made savings during lockdown. I know certainly I have. Can these savings continue? So updating your personal budget is best done using a template so that you don't miss any expenses. And a really easy way to do this is to simply look at your bank statements online to see what you typically spend in a month. Now, of course, you need to be realistic too, as lockdown was very different, as spending opportunities were very limited. So make sure you go back 3 to 4 months to review your overall expenses. Now, once you've done your personal budget, you can then start to build up your revised business budget. Now, many of you may have already done a business budget for the year. Now, this is likely to change significantly now. And ordinarily, when you're doing a business budget, most businesses will start with a top-down approach. So they'll look at what do they think they can sell over the next 12 months, and then what are the costs associated with selling that level of that volume of product or service. Now, in this case, because we're looking at a radically different situation, we would recommend really what we call a bottom-up process, where you start with the increase in cash you need to achieve for the year. And it's really important to start here, as many businesses have found that they didn't actually have a sufficient war chest of cash going into the lockdown. Now, this is not designed to be what you might think of as technical accountantese here. It's just wanting to show you how you can take control back by going through a high-level, step-by-step process here. So the way to build up your budget, if we're actually going to start at the bottom here, so we're going to look at, what's the increase or decrease in cash that we're trying to achieve. And to get to that point, what are the other cash movements that we might be seeing? So you may be able to free up cash by reducing debtors, by reducing stock or work in progress levels, or perhaps by negotiating better terms with suppliers. And we talked about this on the last webinar. The loan principle, if you do have existing loans within the business, you obviously need to allow for the principal repayments on existing and any new finance. But it may be if you've gone for some of the government loans more recently, you've perhaps been restructuring the finance and the loan structures within your business. Again, you need to look at what's the impact going to be on the business of doing that restructuring. Then you can have a look at any asset purchases or perhaps sales. So there may be new assets you need in order to adapt your business, or perhaps there are obsolete ones now that you can sell to generate more cash. Obviously the drawings, now this is where you add in your personal budget from the previous slide. Now drawings, in some of you will be self-employed, so you will be taking drawings from your business. Others like me will be operating through a limited company, so you may be paying yourself a minimum salary and then additional dividends. So depending on the structure, the legal structure of your business will determine where in this equation the figure for drawings or wages or dividends will come. We can certainly help you with this if you need a little bit of guidance. And then once you subtract or add these items in, it'll give you the target profit after tax that you need to achieve. Then, of course, you add in what the tax will be to get your required profit before tax. Then you have a careful look at the overheads to see if you can make any savings. Now that will give you the gross profit that you need to achieve. And then using your desired gross profit percentage, if you know it, and again, we can help you work on this, you can derive the sales levels that you require to give you what you need from the business. So it's all about reviewing these numbers and margins to ensure you can come up with a workable revised budget that A, keeps the business operational, but B, provides you with the financial support that you need as an individual. So ideally from here, you'll then be in a better position to complete a more detailed forecast on a month-by-month basis. So you then have a basis from which to track your progress. Now, of course, tracking your progress then becomes a key issue. And this is where having real-time digital reports of your numbers is so important. So for example, if you'd have identified that your sales total for the year needed to be, say, £500,000, that equates to around £10,500 a week if your business is open 48 weeks a year. So you'll want to have a system for recording how you're going against that target. Likewise, if you have debtor terms of 7 days, but your debtors are actually currently taking around 41 days to pay you on average, you'll want to measure if that number is improving and focus on making improvements if it isn't going in the right direction. Typically, we recommend that you measure no more than 5 of your most important numbers. And probably no surprise, these are what we refer to as key performance indicators or KPIs. Some examples of these would be things like daily or weekly sales, gross profit by product or service, debtor days is a crucial one, or perhaps increase or decrease in cash for the month. Once you have your KPIs and the budget, it's important to have these numbers loaded into your monthly reporting system so you can track your actual results to your budget. Tracking these numbers doesn't need to be complex. You don't necessarily need to have lots and lots of technology, depending on the sophistication or complexity of your business. Some of the key KPIs that I monitor for my own business are simply kept within an Excel spreadsheet. So don't panic about suddenly having to invest in lots and lots of new technology. Now, once we know at a high level what your budget is, it's time to then look at the opportunities that exist to help you achieve that budget. Again, we recommend focusing on no more than 5 key opportunities. So think about the ideas we talked about earlier to reinvent your business. So opportunities could also be things like working in more of an online way with your team or your customers. You may no longer need the same premises, or you may need to redefine the roles in your business. There may be new lines of revenue to pursue or other businesses to acquire. Other opportunities might be around the adoption of technology or systems to improve your efficiency or online communication. So taking the time to brainstorm all of these opportunities to improve your business is a really valuable and empowering exercise. You need to leave no stone unturned here. So brainstorm every potential opportunity you can think of to make improvements, and then pick out the 5 most exciting, most realistic, most achievable ones that you want to then focus your attention on. Now, of course, the flip side of opportunity is then the vulnerabilities or the challenges that you might be facing. So just as we looked at the 5 biggest opportunities you're facing, consider what are the 5 biggest vulnerabilities in your business. They could be things like poor cash flow, a sustained downturn in demand for current products or services, poor debtor management or banking covenants not being met. Naming the vulnerabilities enables you to make a plan to overcome them. There's a lovely phrase, name so you can tame, is a great mindset to have. So naming the vulnerabilities will make it much easier for you to then get your head around how to overcome them, how to tame them. And you need to be brutally honest in your assessment of vulnerabilities. A rosy plan for your finances is not going to pass muster in these difficult times. So be brutally honest with yourself and what you're facing. And once you've identified your 5 biggest opportunities and 5 vulnerabilities, you then need to identify your 2 to 3 most critical challenges. And these might be things like deciding whether or not to sell or liquidate part of the business, or establishing an online sales platform, or securing sufficient finance to trade through the next 3 months. Now, we strongly recommend that you also do a careful analysis of all of the risks in your business. And the best way to do this is actually to complete a risk register, which assesses the likelihood of each risk and then the consequences for your business if that risk is not mitigated. Now, this may seem a little bit like overkill. Some of the risks in here may not apply to you in your business, but it is worth looking at each of them in turn. And these risks fall into the following 10 categories. So the first one, governance. So these risks include things like poor planning, lack of up-to-date policy, poor discipline around working on the business. Second one is leadership, and these include risks around communication with your team if you have one, reporting, and keeping team morale high. Number 3 is products or services, so things like the risks around lack of adaptation or innovation to your product set. Number 4 is the operational risks around suppliers and your supply chain, perhaps your contracts and your key customers. Number 5 is risks around marketing, so including things like poor return on investment or overspending or a lack of a digital presence to promote yourself online. Number 6 might be risks around the need to adapt to e-commerce or online selling, or risks around poor training or overselling in these difficult times. Number 7 are financial risks, so perhaps being undercapitalized, lack of sufficient cash flow, poor financing structure, or poor credit control, debtor management, poor reporting, perhaps even a lack of forecasting. Number 8 is HR risks, so things like overspending, poorly managed restructuring, perhaps grievances from employers are not happy with the changes that you have to make to your business. Number 9 is admin, so things like perhaps lack of automation that are making you less efficient than you could otherwise be. And then the final one is obviously technology, so things like poor adaptation of software or apps that perhaps help you improve the way you run the business. Once you've identified the risks to your business in each of those 10 areas, you then need to pull everything together into a cohesive plan with goals, actions, and responsibilities. Now, your business recovery plan is much more detailed than your typical average business plan because you get right down into the detail for each department of the business. And the reason we're doing that is because what you're facing right now is far more critical and challenging than probably anything you've ever seen before, even when you first set up your business. So the goals you set yourself need to be SMART. So they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and above all time bound, so they all have deadlines, and all actions need to be assigned to someone responsible, whether that's you, whether that's somebody else in your team if you have one, whether it's somebody who you work with, perhaps an accountant or an HR advisor. And the goals and actions should be updated regularly through some form of regular review process, whether you do that yourself or with some other third party. And at this time, I would always recommend a monthly review for at least 6 months, and then a change to quarterly after that. Then, of course, we want to try and pull all of this together now as a complete package. So depending on your circumstances and the nature of your business, your complete recovery package should include your personal budget, your risk register, your business recovery plan, your business forecast, an updated organisation chart if you have a team of people, and if you're applying for finance, a finance application. Now, you may not need to do all of this work at the same time. For example, you may already have sufficient cash flow now, so you don't need to apply for finance. Likewise, if you don't have a team, you're probably not going to need an updated organisation chart. What is important is that you establish what's right for you and your business. What combination of these do you need, and who will do them? So we then look at actually the business recovery plan itself. Now, we've already have a template that we can make available to you if you like. And I'm going to walk very briefly through this. I won't go into huge amounts of details, but it'll give you an idea of the sorts of process that potentially you need to be looking at working on. So obviously the starting point is an executive summary, which really just gives an overview of where the business is, where we've got to, how we've got to, what are the key things that we need to be looking at, what are the key things we're going to be doing over the next few weeks and months to get the business back up and running. And then, of course, we then start with the personal budget. So for the business owners, what's their monthly personal spending? So what's the annual spending? What do they need to get cash-wise out of the business? And then looking at, what, if any, new finance might be needed. From the back of that, we then start to develop our high-level budget or our break-even analysis for the business. So given that we need to find, in this case, just over £50,000 of net profit before tax, what does that mean in terms of the overheads that we're going to incur, the gross profit that we need to generate, and therefore what's the revenue that we need to generate for the year to give us that £4,000 a month that we need to spend at a personal level. Then we'd move into looking below the tax line. So what's the increase or decrease in cash that we're going to need to generate off the back of this plan? What's the net profit we're generating with the drawings that we're including? And then we'll start to break that out into each of the following 4 quarters. Then we'd look at what are the critical KPIs that we need to monitor and work to achieve. Similarly, what are the 5 key opportunities that we're going to be focusing our attention on? And then we'd look at the counter side to that. So what are the vulnerabilities that we're going to be trying to address? And then our critical challenges that we know we're going to be facing over the next 12 months. Then the final stage is then to look at each of the individual departments that we saw in that risk register slide earlier on. We'll look at what are the risks that each of these departments, if you like, are facing. What's our mitigation strategy? How are we going to address those risks? We'll then look at what we want to achieve in that respect over the next 12 months. What are the specific things we need to accomplish over the next 90 days in order to move us towards achieving those annual goals? And then what are the specific actions that we as individuals within our business or our team or our advisors need to complete with deadlines, with completion deadlines. So you're making all of these things SMART goals. So everybody knows who's supposed to be doing what and by when, and that you hold each other and hold everybody within your team, whether that's your business team or your advisors team, accountable for doing what they say they're going to do. And again, we'd work through each of those 10 departments, those 10 functions that we looked at within the risk register. Now that might seem a little bit overwhelming, and I hope I haven't overwhelmed you with too much technical detail, but really the goal here is to share with you what business recovery planning is all about and how to do it. So what are your next steps from here? Well, I would say that doing nothing is not an option. We're entering into a period of business as not normal. It's certainly not business as usual. Doing what you've always done is unlikely to give you the same results as you've had in the past. Now, we said this on the last webinar, remember to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. The more sustainable you can make your business right now, the better for everyone. Thirdly, make a plan to get through these challenging times. And focus on what you can do as opposed to worrying about what might happen in the future. And remember, we're here for you if you want help, and we're more than happy to try and help you if we can. And we can help you potentially in a number of ways. So a recommended strategy is absolutely to complete a business recovery plan. And certainly from the clients I've been working with already, we've had some great feedback about how helpful this process is in clarifying the thought process as to where business owners want to move over the next 12 months. So if you haven't already done a business recovery plan, now's the time to do this, as it will form a great foundation from which to build your cash flow improvement strategy. And it'll also help you with loan applications if you're considering doing that. Now, there are a couple of options to complete the plan with the template that I showed you. So the first one is that we can meet with you online, so we can do this together, either as a one session of up to 4 hours or 2 2-hour sessions. Before the session, we'll send you in-depth pre-work to complete, so you have time to consider the impact that the pandemic has had on each department of your business. And we'll then use your completed pre-work to guide us through the plan and set goals for each department. And this ensures you have a detailed and well thought out plan to give your business the best chance of recovery. The second option is a business recovery review. We'll send you a business recovery action list to complete, which is really a condensed version of the plan. So it doesn't go into all of the detail, but it's really encapsulating all of the actions that you've decided you're going to take. And this option suits those of you who may have a small business that really doesn't require a comprehensive business recovery plan. Once you've completed the action plan, we'll then schedule a sort of 15 to 20-minute call to review your plan and your next steps. Now, the risk with this approach is that with everything else going on right now, you may not get around to doing the work. Now, if you're going to need to obtain business funding, it's absolutely vital that you prepare a cash flow forecast. The loan, whatever it is, needs to be repaid, so your business needs to generate enough profit to then convert into cash to make the repayments. And please don't fall into the trap that I've seen some people doing, where they've taken out business loans as a way of covering their personal expenditure in the short term, without really fully understanding that in 12 months' time, that loan is still going to need to be repaid. So unless you have a plan for the business to generate the additional cash to make the loan repayments, please don't take on additional loan requirements. Now, we do know it's potentially difficult to commit to spending money right now. That's why we've discounted the normal fees for work of this type by 50%. And we also have different payment options available. So please don't let cost be a barrier. Get in touch and we can work together to come to an arrangement that will work for you. Now, I do know that the benefits you'll get from these services will be far greater than the fee. Most importantly, it's about helping you as quickly as possible and ensuring we're working with you to build a stronger, more resilient business. Now, these are the services that might help you right now, but we're also here for the long run if you need additional support. So if you're unsure on the best way forward, or you want to talk to us about how we might help you rebuild your business, I'd recommend a complimentary meeting to discuss your goals, your current problems and challenges. And we can then agree between us the best way that we can support you. And this could include things like monthly or quarterly coaching programs where we will challenge your thinking, we'll hold you accountable for the things that you say that you're going to do, and hopefully keep you motivated and on track. Or perhaps what you might want to consider joining one of the sales mastermind groups, where we get a group of like-minded business owners who meet on a regular basis to learn new skills, perhaps polish up old ones. They share their challenges, they share their ideas in a safe forum and challenge and support each other. If any of these strike a chord with you, then please get in touch. So that brings us to the end of the sort of formal presentation. If any of you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat box now. Okay, so I can't see anything as yet, but I did mention right at the start that I'd had a couple of questions from people who wanted to join us, but weren't able to. So the first one, and this is a very common one, and it said, I love the idea of a business recovery plan, but I'm flat out with work right now. How do I free up capacity to do this work? Now, there's a lovely mindset tool. Those of you, I think, who attended the last webinar, we talked about the ORBED model, which is all about taking ownership and accountability. There is another mindset model that I use, which comes off the back of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And this is called the Achiever Matrix, where you look at all of the things that you do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, and you define them in terms of whether or not they're urgent or not urgent, and important or not important. And once you do that and you're really honest with yourself, you'll be surprised how many of those day-to-day activities will actually fall into one of those quadrants that we refer to as the quadrant of waste. And these are things that they're not urgent and they're not important. So it might be, the classic ones, reviewing Facebook to see what your mates are up to and how everybody's enjoying their furloughed time off in the sun while you're trying to earn a crust. So there'll be quite a lot of things that would normally sit in that quadrant of waste that you can just ignore for now because they're not going to do you any good by focusing time. So then look at what you can delegate or outsource to other people, and then be really, really disciplined about putting time into what's important but not urgent, as this will save you time in the future. Now, I really appreciate it's hard to do this when you have urgent and important work to deal with right now. And that's why we want to help you and have created resources to get you started. So if you're feeling that session of overwhelm where you're really not sure how to start, set up one of these complimentary sessions with me. We'll talk through, see if we can come up with ideas of how we can free up some of your time. The second one, which is really a sort of paraphrased version of a question that I've seen a few times, is, I'm concerned I can't afford to do this work. What can you suggest? Well, I don't want to be glib and say you can't afford not to do it. And the answer here really is that, if you really think that you need help and you want to work with me, please get in touch. The fees that you saw on that earlier slide have been discounted by 50%, and that's really trying to make a gesture that everybody may be struggling with cash at the moment, but equally we still all need to keep our own businesses ticking over. But I'm more than happy to look at things like spreading costs, payment plans, if that's something that would help, where you feel that you really need that additional assistance to help build your own plan. Okay, so a couple of nice bits of feedback. Thank you very much indeed for those of you who've done that. We will also be sending out a feedback form, survey question after the session as well. So if there are no further questions, let me move on to our parting thoughts. So thank you so much for making the time to attend the webinar. I do appreciate that your time is incredibly valuable right now, and I hope that I've given you a few ideas to think about and some clear options for how we might be able to support you. But before I go, I thought I'd just share this quote for you, which I really like. So, things may never go back to normal. We need to create a new normal, and that's okay. So my advice, my guidance, my recommendation is make a simple plan today. Commit to at least 3 actions that you're going to take as a result of being here today. Write them down, give each of them an owner and a completion date. And this is a really, really worrying time for many businesses, but you don't need to worry alone. There's a huge amount of support out there and more to come, and we're here to support you if you need us. Thank you so much for your time. If any of you do want to get in touch directly, you can see my email and my phone number here. And please take care of yourself, your families, your teams. Good luck with whatever the future holds. And if you think that we can help, by all means, get in touch. Thank you very much.